Normandy, June 1944. The pre-dawn quiet, just after 0100 hours, was a fragile illusion over the coastal defenses. German confidence in the Atlantic Wall, a colossal undertaking of concrete and steel, was absolute, a psychological bulwark as much as a physical one. Its perceived impregnability was the linchpin of their defensive strategy against the anticipated Allied invasion, the very foundation upon which the Reich's Western security rested. Oberleutnant Karl Richter, an artillery battery commander stationed near St. Mary-Glees, understood this faith intimately. His 10.5-centimeter LFH-18 howitzers, emplaced within thick concrete casemates, represented a fraction of the immense firepower arrayed along the coastline. He had personally overseen the meticulous calibration of his guns, their arcs of fire intersecting with those of neighboring batteries, creating a deadly latticework across the beaches and the immediate hinterland. The sheer scale of the construction effort had fostered this pervasive sense of security. From Norway to the Spanish border, over 15,000 bunkers, casemates, and strongpoints had been erected, consuming an estimated 17 million cubic meters of concrete. Each structure was designed to withstand direct naval bombardment, its reinforced steel doors and embrasures presenting a formidable challenge to any frontal assault. Richter's battery, like many others, was a self-contained fighting unit, stocked with ammunition, rations, and medical supplies sufficient for weeks of sustained combat. The strategic implication was clear. Any seaborne invasion would be met with an unyielding wall of fire, grinding to a halt on the beaches under the overwhelming weight of coordinated artillery and machine gun fire. This belief, deeply ingrained in the German command structure, dictated their deployment and their expectations for the coming conflict. The coastal defenses were not merely static emplacements. They were integrated into a complex system of observation posts, minefields, and anti-tank obstacles. Barbed wire entanglements stretched for kilometers, often concealing anti-personnel mines, while sharpened stakes known as Rommel's asparagus protruded from fields to deter airborne landings. The meticulous layering of these defenses fostered a deep-seated conviction that no force could breach the wall without suffering catastrophic losses. The training exercises Richter's men conducted reinforced this perception. They practiced engaging targets at sea, their shells splashing precisely where enemy landing craft would be most vulnerable. The drills instilled a sense of professional competence and an almost serene certainty in the effectiveness of their fixed positions. The Atlantic Wall was not just a line of fortifications, it was a testament to German engineering and resolve, an unbreachable barrier against the tide of Allied aggression. The wind, a constant companion along the Norman coast, carried the scent of salt and damp earth into the concrete casemates. Inside, the rhythm of garrison life settled into a predictable cadence, a stark contrast to the distant drumbeat of the Eastern Front. Soldiers of the Wehrmacht, many of them older men, or those deemed less fit for the brutal campaigns in Russia, found a relative respite in the fortifications of the Atlantic Wall. Their duties revolved around maintenance, observation, and the eternal vigil against an enemy that for years remained unseen. Daily routines commenced with reveille, followed by inspections of weapons and positions. The heavy artillery pieces, ranging from captured French 155mm guns to formidable German 210mm mortars, received meticulous attention. Gunners checked breech mechanisms, cleaned barrels, and verified traverse and elevation systems, ensuring the complex machinery remained ready for an engagement that never materialized. Ammunition stores, often buried deep beneath meters of reinforced concrete, were inventoried, the heavy shells neatly stacked in their designated bays. Observation posts, some perched precariously on cliff tops, others integrated into the reinforced concrete of the larger strong points, were manned around the clock. Binoculars and rangefinders, German-made and optically superior, swept the vast expanse of the English Channel. The occasional distant freighter or fishing vessel was noted in logbooks, its course and speed meticulously recorded, but the expected armada remained a phantom. This ceaseless watch, while monotonous, instilled a sense of purpose, a belief in the impregnability of their concrete and steel defenses. Training exercises, though infrequent, broke the monotony. Infantry units practiced beach defense scenarios, rehearsing rapid deployment to potential landing zones, while machine gun crews zeroed their MG-34s and MG-42s against distant targets. The sound of rifle fire and the staccato burst of automatic weapons echoed across the dunes, a reminder of their martial purpose. Engineers, meanwhile, continued their work, laying new minefields and stringing additional barbed wire, extending the already formidable coastal defenses. Morale, while not universally high, benefited from the relative safety and better rations compared to other fronts. Letters from home arrived with some regularity, bringing news of families and a connection to a world beyond the concrete bunkers. Local French civilians, though under occupation, often provided a degree of normalcy, selling goods in the markets and maintaining a semblance of pre-war life, albeit under strict German oversight. The soldiers, in turn, often found themselves in a static, almost domestic, environment, far removed from the dynamic horrors of total war. The West here, the German forces in the West, numbered approximately 1.5 million men by early 1944, with a significant portion allocated to the coastal defenses. Field Marshal Rommel, tasked with strengthening the wall, pushed for a more aggressive forward defense, advocating for mines and obstacles to be placed directly in the water. His directives, though implemented with varying degrees of success, reflected a growing unease within the high command regarding the perceived invulnerability of the static defenses. Yet, for the average soldier, the concrete walls and heavy guns represented an unassailable barrier, a shield against any invasion. Even as intelligence reports filtered in, hinting at an impending Allied buildup across the Channel, the daily life along the wall continued largely undisturbed. The fortifications, constructed over years with immense labor and material, fostered a powerful psychological effect, both on those who built them and those who garrisoned them. They were a testament to German engineering and resolve, a physical manifestation of the belief that no enemy could breach this formidable barrier. The quiet hum of generators, the distant crash of waves, and the rhythmic clang of tools against steel remained the dominant sounds of their existence. The German High Command, in its meticulous accounting, did possess scattered reports, often filed under unconfirmed or speculative, detailing nascent Allied airborne experiments. These early intelligence fragments, drawn from reconnaissance over British airfields and intercepted radio chatter, spoke of modified transport aircraft and unusual parachute deployments observed during training exercises. A 1942 Abwehr analysis, for instance, noted a marked increase in C-47 Skytrain production, a twin-engine transport aircraft, far exceeding conventional logistical needs, prompting a recommendation for closer scrutiny of Allied air doctrine. These reports, however, were frequently contextualized within the prevailing strategic assumptions of a frontal assault. The sheer scale and complexity of a seaborne invasion, with its attendant logistical demands and naval supremacy requirements, dominated German defensive planning. Airborne operations, when considered, were largely viewed as auxiliary tactics, useful for securing small, isolated objectives or disrupting rear-area communications in support of a main thrust, rather than as an independent strategic threat. The fortifications of the Atlantic Wall, with their robust concrete emplacements and interlocking fields of fire, were designed to repel an enemy advancing from the sea, their primary orientation facing the Channel. The psychological impact of the Allied commando raids, though limited in their material effect, did contribute to a low-level undercurrent of concern regarding unconventional warfare. Operations like Dieppe, while a costly Allied failure, demonstrated a willingness to land troops directly onto defended beaches, reinforcing the belief that the main threat would always materialize from the seaward approaches. The concept of an enemy appearing suddenly from the sky, bypassing the formidable coastal defenses entirely, remained largely an abstract theoretical exercise, relegated to the margins of strategic thought. Production logs from German armaments factories indicated a continued prioritization of anti-tank and anti-ship weaponry, reflecting the expected nature of the invasion. The manufacture of 7.5 cm POC 40 anti-tank guns and 8.8 cm Flak 36 anti-aircraft guns, though versatile, was primarily allocated to coastal defense sectors and panzer divisions, with little specific adaptation for an airborne threat. The sheer volume of concrete poured into the construction of bunkers and casemates, estimated at over 17 million cubic meters by late 1943, underscored the unwavering faith in static, linear defense. A captured British training manual, recovered from a downed aircraft in early 1943, contained diagrams of parachute landing zones and instructions for assembling collapsible bicycles, providing a fleeting glimpse into potential airborne mobility. However, the manual's contents were ultimately dismissed by most senior German intelligence officers as either a deception or applicable only to small-scale sabotage missions. The immensity of the Atlantic Wall, a continuous barrier stretching thousands of kilometers, seemed to render such minor incursions strategically irrelevant, a mere pinprick against an iron shield. The moon, a sliver obscured by low cloud, offered little illumination as the first waves of transport aircraft approached the French coast. Below, the German garrisons of the Atlantic Wall remained largely oblivious, their radar screens scanning seaward, their listening posts attuned to the rumble of approaching naval formations. The air above was a canvas of unseen movement, C-47 Skytrains laden with men and equipment, maintaining radio silence, their engines a low thrum against the vast indifference of the night. These aircraft, part of Operation Neptune, carried the vanguard of the airborne assault, elements of the 82nd and 101st U.S. Airborne Divisions, and the British 6th Airborne Division. Their mission was to drop behind the coastal defenses, seize key bridges, secure vital crossroads, and neutralize artillery batteries that could fire upon the landing beaches. Each paratrooper, burdened with 90 to 120 pounds of gear, represented a calculated risk, a gamble on surprise and the disorienting chaos of night combat. The initial drops, commencing shortly after midnight, were scattered by strong winds and anti-aircraft fire, a testament to the unpredictable nature of airborne operations. Pilots, navigating by dead reckoning and occasional glimpses of obscured landmarks, struggled to maintain formation. Some sticks of paratroopers landed miles from their designated drop zones, often deep within enemy territory, far from their intended rallying points. Despite the dispersion, the sheer volume of descending troops created an unnerving, diffuse threat. German sentries, hearing the distant drone of aircraft and then the rustle of silk in the darkness, often dismissed the sounds as reconnaissance flights or errant bombers. The concept of massed paratrooper landings behind their supposedly impregnable defenses was, for many, an abstract threat, not a present reality. The first engagements were sporadic, isolated firefights erupting in orchards and hedgerows as small groups of paratroopers, finding themselves unexpectedly amidst German patrols, reacted with trained ferocity. These skirmishes, though localized, served to sow confusion. Reports of enemy activity filtering back to bewildered German commanders who struggled to ascertain the scale or intent of the incursions. One such encounter involved elements of the U.S. 101st Airborne dropped near Sainte-Mère-Église, where some paratroopers landed directly into the town square, illuminated by a burning building. The ensuing chaos, a desperate close-quarters battle, highlighted the immediate and unexpected nature of the airborne threat. For the German soldiers defending the town, the enemy had literally fallen from the sky. The strategic implication of these scattered landings was profound. Instead of a single, concentrated assault, the Germans faced myriad small threats emerging from unexpected directions. Communication lines were cut, roads were blocked, and vital command posts found themselves under direct attack, disrupting their ability to coordinate a coherent response to the impending seaborne invasion. The psychological impact was equally significant. The belief in the Atlantic Wall's invulnerability, carefully cultivated by propaganda and reinforced by years of construction, began to erode. The enemy was not just at the gate, they were already inside, a phantom menace materializing from the darkness, striking at the very heart of their defensive network. The trust placed in the concrete and steel of the fortifications was now challenged by the unseen enemy behind them. The paratroopers landing behind the coastal defenses tore a hole in the fabric of German certainty. For months, the men of the 709th and 716th Infantry Divisions had labored, often under duress, to construct and garrison the Atlantic Wall, believing it to be an impregnable shield against the inevitable invasion. The sudden appearance of Allied forces, not on the beaches, but in the very heart of their rear areas, shattered this carefully cultivated illusion of security. The initial reports filtering back to regimental headquarters were fragmentary, laced with confusion and disbelief. Small arms fire erupted in unexpected villages. Communication lines were cut with alarming regularity, and patrols dispatched to investigate often vanished or returned decimated. This was not the frontal assault they'd had trained for. This was an insidious penetration, a phantom enemy materializing from the darkness. Morale, already brittle from years of war and the grinding attrition on the Eastern Front, began to crack. Interrogation files of captured German soldiers reveal a recurring theme of shock and betrayal. They had been assured of the wall's invincibility, a psychological bulwark as much as a physical one. Now, that assurance lay in tatters, replaced by a gnawing fear that no position was truly safe, no flank truly secure. The strategic implications were immediate and profound. Instead of a cohesive defense focused on the beaches, German commanders were forced to divert precious reserves and combat-ready units to hunt down elusive pockets of paratroopers in their own backyard. This dispersion of forces weakened the coastal defenses at the critical moment of the amphibious landings, creating a cascade of tactical disadvantages that would prove impossible to overcome. The very concept of a static, linear defense, upon which the entire Atlantic Wall strategy rested, was fundamentally undermined. The paratroopers had demonstrated that air superiority, combined with audacious planning, could bypass even the most formidable fortifications. The meticulous planning, the millions of cubic meters of concrete, the thousands of machine guns, all were rendered partially irrelevant by men descending from the night sky. The psychological blow resonated beyond the immediate battlefields of Normandy. It instilled a new, unsettling understanding among German high command. No matter how robust the defenses, the initiative could always be seized by an enemy willing to innovate and take calculated risks. The illusion of absolute control over their occupied territories, meticulously crafted over 4 years, had vanished with the dawn. The initial reports filtering back to German regimental and divisional headquarters were a chaotic tapestry of half-truths and panicked conjecture. Small arms fire erupted from unexpected directions, often from within the perceived safety of rear areas, disrupting communications and sowing widespread confusion. Roadblocks, previously manned by complacent sentries, suddenly found themselves under attack from unseen assailants, their positions compromised by forces that seemed to materialize from the very earth. Damage reports indicated cut telephone lines, sabotaged vehicles, and sporadic ambushes on supply convoys. A unit diary from the 716th Infantry Division noted, "Enemy paratroopers confirmed in our sector, a stark admission of the impossible." The sheer dispersal of the landings, though largely accidental, amplified the perceived scale of the invasion. A handful of isolated paratroopers, often miles from their intended drop zones, could effectively tie down entire platoons of German infantry for hours, their presence an unnerving phantom. The German command structure, designed for a frontal assault from the sea, struggled to adapt to this multi-directional threat. Orders were issued for immediate counterattacks, but without clear intelligence on enemy strength or location. These responses were often piecemeal and ineffectual. Reserve units, intended to reinforce coastal defenses, found themselves diverted inland to hunt down elusive pockets of paratroopers, their movements slowed by damaged infrastructure and the constant threat of ambush. Interrogation files from captured paratroopers later revealed the profound disorientation experienced by German troops. Many believed they were facing a much larger airborne invasion than was actually the case, their fear fueled by the unexpected nature of the attack. The psychological impact of an enemy operating behind their lines, seemingly at will, eroded morale and trust in the impregnability of their defenses. Field Marshal Rommel, upon learning of the airborne landings, initially dismissed them as a diversion, convinced the main assault would still come from the sea. This initial misjudgment, born from a rigid adherence to his pre-invasion assessments, delayed a coordinated response. By the time the full scope of the airborne operations began to sink in, the paratroopers had already secured key objectives and established a tenuous foothold, their presence a festering wound in the German rear. Normandy, June 1944. The initial shock of the airborne landings, once contained to isolated pockets, began to coalesce into a broader strategic crisis. The meticulously constructed fortifications of the Atlantic Wall, designed to repel seaborne invasion along a linear front, found their core defensive principle undermined by the presence of enemy forces operating with relative freedom in the rear areas. This meant that the coastal guns, the concrete casemates, and the intricate minefields, while still formidable obstacles, were no longer the sole determinants of the battle's outcome. Reports from scattered garrisons along the coast, initially focused on localized engagements, increasingly painted a picture of widespread disruption. Road networks, critical for the movement of reserves and supplies, were interdicted by small, highly mobile airborne units. Telephone lines, often buried to resist shelling, proved vulnerable to sabotage teams working behind the lines, severing vital command and control links between coastal strongpoints and their inland support formations. The coastal divisions, designed for static defense, found themselves fighting a two-front war, facing the sea with their heavy armaments and the land with their lighter, less numerous infantry. The strategic implication of this dual threat was profound. Instead of concentrating their forces to meet the seaborne assault head-on, German commanders were forced to divert precious reserves to counter the airborne threat. The 91st Air Landing Division, earmarked for anti-invasion duties, was fragmented, its battalions committed piecemeal to clear parachute drop zones and glider landing sites. This internal bleeding of resources weakened the overall defensive posture at the very moment maximum strength was required to repel the main Allied landings. Further inland, the confusion sown by the paratroopers significantly delayed the deployment of panzer divisions. The 21st Panzer Division, positioned near Caen, received conflicting orders and was subjected to persistent harassment from airborne elements, slowing its advance towards the beaches. This delay, measured in critical hours, allowed the Allied beachheads to consolidate, bringing ashore heavy equipment and establishing a more robust logistical infrastructure. The meticulously planned counterattack, intended to drive the invaders back into the sea, lost its crucial element of surprise and momentum. The psychological impact on the German defenders was equally significant. The belief in the impregnability of the Atlantic Wall, fostered by years of propaganda and construction, began to erode. The idea that the enemy could simply bypass the formidable coastal defenses appearing unexpectedly from the skies introduced a new dimension of vulnerability. This pervasive sense of insecurity contributed to a more reactive, rather than proactive, defensive strategy, as units became increasingly concerned with their flanks and rear. Interrogation files later revealed a consistent narrative among captured German soldiers. The paratroopers were everywhere. This perception, whether entirely accurate or amplified by the fog of war, underscored the effectiveness of the airborne strategy in creating a widespread sense of encirclement and disarray. The Atlantic Wall, a monument to static defense, had been outmaneuvered not by frontal assault, but by a maneuver that rendered its primary strength largely irrelevant. The dawn of June 6, 1944, revealed a landscape irrevocably altered. The initial reports from coastal strongpoints spoke of naval bombardments, but the deeper, more insidious threat materialized from the pre-dawn darkness. Paratroopers, their silhouettes barely visible against the lingering night, had descended with a chilling precision, establishing footholds far behind the vaunted coastal defenses. The meticulous planning, the years of construction, the concrete and steel, all designed to repel an assault from the sea, proved strategically irrelevant against an enemy that materialized from the sky. German command, still grappling with the scale of the seaborne landings, received fragmented and often contradictory intelligence regarding the airborne operations. Unit diaries from Grenadier Regiment 919, stationed near St. Mary-Église, noted strange noises and sporadic gunfire, hours before the main naval assault commenced. These isolated incidents, initially dismissed as reconnaissance probes or local partisan activity, quickly coalesced into a pattern of widespread infiltration, severing communication lines and seizing critical crossroads. The operational impact was immediate and profound. The coastal artillery batteries, intended to decimate the landing craft, found their landward flanks exposed, their crews often engaged in desperate, close-quarters combat against unseen assailants. The 91st Air Landing Division, designated as a mobile reserve, found its deployment hampered by damaged bridges and ambushes, its advance slowed to a crawl. Roads vital for counterattacks were either blocked or under direct fire, turning rapid response into a grinding attrition. The logistical implications cascaded through the German defensive posture. Fuel and ammunition convoys, essential for sustaining any prolonged engagement, were targeted with ruthless efficiency. Interrogation files from captured paratroopers later detailed specific objectives: bridge demolition, communication node disruption, and the establishment of blocking positions. These actions, coordinated across vast swathes of the Cotentin Peninsula, effectively isolated the coastal garrisons, leaving them to face the seaborne invasion without adequate reinforcement or resupply. The illusion of impregnability, so carefully cultivated by propaganda and reinforced by the sheer physical presence of the Atlantic Wall, shattered with each confirmed report of paratroopers behind the lines. The strategic doctrine had focused almost exclusively on a frontal assault from the sea, underestimating the capacity for a multi-dimensional attack. The fixed defenses, designed to channel and destroy an enemy at the water's edge, offered little protection against an adversary that had already bypassed them. The psychological toll on the German defenders was significant. The constant threat from unseen enemies, the sudden appearance of paratroopers in unexpected locations, fostered a sense of encirclement and vulnerability. Unit morale reports from the 709th Infantry Division, positioned to defend the Utah Beach sector, indicated a marked decrease in confidence, following the confirmed airborne landings. The belief in the wall's efficacy, a bedrock of their defensive strategy, evaporated under the weight of this new reality. The failure was not one of construction or material strength, but of strategic foresight. The wall, a marvel of engineering, was a static solution to a dynamic problem. Its immense concrete emplacements and intricate minefields were rendered largely irrelevant by an enemy that did not confront them directly. The 155mm coastal guns at Crispec, designed to engage targets at sea, remained operational but found their field of fire increasingly restricted by the fighting on their landward approaches. By the close of D-Day, Allied forces had established a secure foothold across all 5 landing beaches, a feat made possible, in large part, by the disorganization and